It's like every time you check the news, there's some new thing happening in crypto, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a fast-moving space, for sure.
Yeah. It can feel like you need like a secret decoder ring just to know what's going on.
Blah.
But, you just want to know what matters.
Yeah, you don't need all the noise.
Exactly. The signal, not the noise. And that's what we're all about today, right? Cutting through all the headlines and all the hype to get to what actually matters. Like, we've really dug in and done our research so you don't have to.
Yeah. Think of this as your cheat sheet for understanding what's truly moving the needle in crypto right now. We've boiled it all down to the essentials.
So, let's just dive right in, right?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so one of the things that, really caught my eye was the connection between, traditional finance, your banks and stuff, and the world of crypto.
Yeah, that's been a big theme recently, for sure.
Right. And, the FDIC, they've, changed their tune a little bit. They're saying banks can actually get involved with crypto now, which is kind of a big deal.
Yeah. It is, because remember, not too long ago, they weren't so keen on the idea.
Right. Totally different vibe now. And they're even saying they're going to come out with, clearer rules soon. So it seems like they're trying to build, a bridge between those two worlds.
Yeah. What's fascinating about this shift is the potential for easier access to crypto for everyday people.
Right. Like if your bank is suddenly like, hey, you want to buy some Bitcoin?
Exactly. It could really change the game in terms of adoption and integration. And speaking of integration, Nasdaq just filed to list a spot ETF for Avalanche, which is pretty huge.
Wait, so like a spot ETF for Avalanche? Explain that to me like I'm 5.
Sure. So basically, a spot ETF means you could invest in a fund that directly holds Avalanche, similar to how Bitcoin ETFs work.
Oh, okay. So it's like an easier way to get exposure without having to manage your own crypto wallet and stuff.
Right, exactly. It could open up Avalanche to a whole new wave of investors who prefer that ETF structure. And, this follows a similar move by Van Eck, another big player in the ETF space.
So it seems like ETFs are becoming a bigger and bigger deal in crypto.
Yeah, it's another sign of the market maturing and becoming more mainstream. And speaking of mainstream, we're also seeing more and more companies putting Bitcoin on their balance sheets, like Dominari Holdings. They just invested $2 million in BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF and plan to keep adding to that.
Whoa, $2 million. That's a pretty big vote of confidence.
It is. It's a sign that some companies are starting to see Bitcoin as not just a speculative asset, but as a legitimate part of their financial strategy.
It makes you wonder, who's going to be next, right?
Yeah, for sure. Now, it's worth noting that the market hasn't been all sunshine and rainbows recently. We saw a bit of a dip, about 5% or so, mostly because of some inflation data that came out.
Oh, yeah, I remember seeing that.
It kind of dampened expectations for interest rate cuts, which can impact all markets, including crypto.
So, a little bit of a reality check after all the ETF excitement?
Yeah, you could say that. And what's interesting is that while Bitcoin held relatively steady during this dip, some of the other smaller cryptocurrencies, what we call altcoins, saw steeper declines.
Altcoins, right?
Yeah. So this pause in what's often called altcoin rotation, where gains kind of spread beyond Bitcoin to other assets, is something to watch closely, especially with all this positive ETF news.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how that plays out. And speaking of Bitcoin, I noticed that its dominance, its share of the total crypto market, has actually been climbing.
It has. In fact, it's reached its highest level since 2021.
Wow, since 2021.
Yeah. It suggests that maybe in times of broader economic uncertainty, some investors are gravitating towards what's perceived as a more established asset, like Bitcoin.
Makes sense. Kind of like going back to the basics when things get shaky.
Right. So all of this points to a particular kind of market sentiment right now, one that's worth paying attention to.
Definitely. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about some of the legal stuff that's been happening, because there's been a lot of that too.
Yeah, there has.
So, for example, Trump pardoned the BitMEX co-founders.
Right. For those who might not remember, they were charged with violating the Bank Secrecy Act.
And that's basically a law about preventing financial crimes, right?
Yeah, things like money laundering and stuff like that. So this pardon basically removes that legal hurdle for them.
Interesting. It'll be interesting to see what they do next.
Yeah. On a different note, Galaxy Digital, a big crypto investment firm, just settled with the New York Attorney General for a pretty big chunk of change.
Oh, what was that about?
It stemmed from their past promotion of LUNA, that cryptocurrency that, didn't end so well.
Yeah, that was a whole thing.
It was. And this settlement kind of highlights the importance of transparency and due diligence when it comes to, talking about and promoting crypto investment.
Definitely. You got to be careful out there.
At that,
So what else?
well, looking ahead, the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, is planning to launch its own digital currency in late 2025.
Like their own version of a dollar, but digital.
Exactly. It's called a central bank digital currency, or CBDC. And the governor of their central bank has said this is all about promoting financial stability and reducing illicit financial activities.
So like making things more efficient and harder for bad actors to do their thing.
Yeah, you could say that. It'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. And then on a less positive note, we saw that a Coinbase user got hit with a pretty sophisticated scam recently.
Oh no, another one of those.
Yeah, it was a social engineering attack, which basically means they tricked the user into giving up access to their account, and the amount they lost was, well, it was significant. A lot of Bitcoin.
That's scary because it shows that even if the technology itself is secure, the human element can still be a weak point.
It's a good reminder that security is an ongoing thing in crypto. You always have to be vigilant.
Yeah, vigilance is key. And then finally, there's an update for anyone who was affected by the whole Terra Luna collapse last year.
Right. They've opened up a creditor claims portal so people can file their claims as part of the bankruptcy case.
Okay, so that's something people should definitely look into if they were involved in that.
For sure.
Wow, so we've covered like a lot of ground here.
We have. It's been a busy few weeks in crypto.
We talked about evolving regulations, the whole ETF landscape, market ups and downs, some big legal happenings, and even the rise of digital currencies.
It's a constantly shifting landscape, that's for sure.
Yeah, it really is. And I think, each of these developments gives us a little window into where crypto is headed.
It really does. It's fascinating to watch it all unfold.
I know, right? So, as we wrap up here, I'm curious, what do you think is the most significant thing we talked about today? Like, what really stood out to you?
That's a tough one. There's so much to choose from.
I know, right? But what really makes you think, this is important?
I think for me, it's the FDIC's change of heart on banks and crypto. It feels like a real turning point.
Yeah, it could really change the game. So, if you're listening, I'd love to hear your thoughts, too. What resonated with you? What questions do you have after hearing all of this? Drop a comment below. Let's keep the conversation going.
Yeah, let us know what you think.
And, hey, while you're at it, if you're enjoying these deep dives, hit that subscribe button. We're dropping new episodes all the time to keep you in the loop.
We appreciate you being here.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.